And so as long as the mission was still getting done, I was trying to make sure that everybody was still sound, not just in the job, but morale is such a huge, important thing that a lot of leadership looks over.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode. Today's guest is Steph. She is an outgoing, self-disciplined skincare specialist with a keen attention to detail from more than 13 years of precise military experience, originally hailing from a small town named Port Arthur, Texas, where she was born and raised with her older sister, Susan, and by her mother and father, Donald and Shizu. I hope I said that right. Shizui. Shizui Gunner. She early on dreamt of a career in beauty and was enticed by the stability of a military career after barely making it out of high school. Despite her troubled teen years, she now has a long list of formal training. In her free time, Steph really enjoys the outdoors with her 3 children by hiking, running, swimming, shooting, and gardening. She also loves volunteering in the local community with her family and friends. Steph adores traveling to new places, learning more about magic and astrology, and relishing in pescatarian and vegetarian dishes. Steph adopts introspection and healing from the inside out as her daily mantra, which has allowed her to stay grounded throughout her life journey and finds peace in helping others do the same. Steph, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome having you here to share your story. You told me a little bit about what has happened to you, and I'm really intrigued to hear it myself. So I will hand the mic off to you and take it away.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I really reached out. I love what you're doing. And I just really wanted to really encourage somebody that even that they may have had some troubles while they were in the military, that life does go on. And maybe you may have grown past that chapter in your life, but that doesn't mean that life's over for you, So for myself, I have a pretty crazy story. I joined the military straight out of high school, which I barely made it out of high school, as I mentioned in my bio. I had actually failed the 11th grade from absences because I wanted to skip school all the time, right? So I always tell people, hey, make sure you keep your kids in sports and any type of like extracurricular activities, because the moment I got out of that was the time when, the other influences and just started getting off track and distracted. But I was always a very intelligent child, right? So I was like super rebellious. So, the intelligence always comes with I want to be outside the box too, right? So even whenever I was growing up, I had always had an interest in beauty. I used to have, girls lined up at the house. My sister was like a bootleg beautician. She was doing the hair. And then I would have all of my friends. I remember shaping people's brows with like the little shavers and doing makeup I would have like all my friends in my house before prom, before any of the little balls and stuff we would have. So I was always interested in makeup, but I think back then, not really knowing myself that well, I really just didn't want to be cute. I didn't want to just be some pretty face. I knew I was very intelligent, and I did want to really focus on, maybe doing and going in an avenue where I would be using my brains more, right? Now that I'm older, I understand the duality of a person and how, you don't have to be in a box. You're not one or the other. You could be so many different extremes, right? And so back then, though, also, there weren't many like beauty CEOs that I was familiar with. Where I was growing up, it was a really small town. All I knew of were cosmetologists. And back then I had no idea that cosmetologists actually did hair, skin, and nails, because every cosmetologist that I knew did hair. And none of them had their own businesses. They all, just worked and did hair in a salon. And I just didn't have the example of the huge beauty CEO that we see nowadays, especially in the skin industry and with estheticians blowing up in the more recent years. So I kind of was like, well, that's not really going to get me anywhere, being in the beauty industry. I had the opportunity to pursue that, but I guess I just didn't have the right influences back then, right? And I don't regret that, because the time that I spent in the military really gave me lots of tools, lots of resources to help me become successful where I am right now. So, especially with all the systems, processes, with the military, it's like we have to be able to keep this ship rolling no matter who's coming in the door, right? That's why we have to have all these processes in place and lots of continuity. But it's helped me so much now. But I decided that, okay, I just need to get a diploma. I'm here. I'm in the 11th. I showed up to the 12th grade thinking I was in the 12th grade. Okay. So me and actually about 3 of my friends all failed the 11th grade because we were all hanging out together, doing God knows what, right? So I'm the first one that shows up to school on the first day of 12th grade. And there's a list on the wall for you to know which homeroom you go to. So I'm looking on the senior list and I'm like, I don't see my name on here, which is sad because I had never had a counseling session. Nobody ever told me I failed the 11th grade. I mean, I should have known, but I get there and I'm like, okay, well, let me go look on the 11th grade list. So I get to the 11th grade list and there's my name. I'm still in 11th grade, right? My friend walks in the door. She just got to school. She starts going to that list. I'm like, homegirl, come on over here to this list. You definitely ain't on the 12th grade list if I ain't on it, okay? So me and my friends like banded together and we actually went like on a search, on a hunt for some type of way out, because one thing we did know is that we didn't want to stay in Port Arthur. Okay. It's just not a place you want to be. So I was like, I have to get away from here. At the time, whenever my sister, I have an older sister, as you mentioned, and my sister had a full ride scholarship for track. Well, she actually had a choice between track and academics. She actually went with academics. She's like, this is going to be easier. But at the time too, she had also had my grandmother as a guardian, who my grandmother really didn't have a lot of income. So she was able to get a lot of financial help along with her academic scholarship, right? My dad had a decent enough job to where I was not going to be afforded those types of opportunities. And with everything that I had jacked up already, I was like, I'm definitely not getting a scholarship. Like, I don't want my dad to have to pay for me to go to school. And I was just kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I need to get out of here. So we banded together. We found this charter school, which was supposed to be like an accelerated school, but it ended up just being like a lot of like 18 and 19-year-olds were like probation officers, a lot of pregnant, people that are still in school. There may have been like 1 or 2 kids that were like actually there for the right reason, like trying to accelerate and get out of school on time. And then, the rest of us were like delinquents, right? So I'm like, all I need is a diploma. I end up, because I had failed from absences, I had still passed the majority of my classes in grades, right? But there's this little star next to each class that's like, you weren't here 97% of the time, which is the cutoff, so, or 93 or something like that. So you don't get this credit. So I had to make up a full 7 credits from my junior year. And so when I got there, they told me though, because you have passing grades, you can take the end of course exam and you will get credit for those classes, right? So as soon as I got there, I ended up being able to test out about 3 classes. So I got 3 credits off top from that. And then the way the school worked was every 9 weeks, you would get a half a credit, right? So on top of that, this school had a different minimum for graduation than what my school did. So instead of having 25 credits to graduate, you only had to have 23. So right then and there, I was already done with 5 credits, right? 3 from testing, the 2 that I didn't even need. So now I just needed to make up 2 from the previous year on top of finish what I needed in my senior year, right? So luckily through like I had a couple of little tribulations when I was there too, but eventually I made it out, right? Graduate, I'm like, all I need is a diploma, because I had made up my mind that I was going to go to the Air Force. I was like, if I want to go to school, then this would be a good way for me to pay to go to school. I'll be able to get away from Port Arthur. I wanted to travel. I had all these ideas, and this was after 9/11 too. So I was, I kind of had a little patriotism going on with me too. So I'm like, I can do this, and I really felt like I needed the discipline. I didn't want to stay where I was at. I knew I had made some mistakes, but I definitely had reached a point in my life where I wanted to do a turnaround. It just so happened that after I decided to go to the Air Force, I graduated and everything. That was May. My 18th birthday was in August. And I remember right after my 18th birthday, my dad, my sister, like I told you, she had went off to college. So she was in Houston. She went to the University of Houston, and I was visiting her, and we were like driving back from Houston to Port Arthur, which is like 90 miles away, like hour and a half. And I remember us driving back, and my dad calls us, and he's like, he's going to rehab. And we're like, for what? We had absolutely no idea that our father was an alcoholic. And with my dad really deciding to make that change with himself, we both were kind of like in this space where we were just trying to be better, trying to turn over a new leaf. My dad said he really made that decision because of the things that were happening with me. He's like, I heard you, like you and your mom going back and forth one day, and I just heard your voice drown out, and I just heard myself, and he's like, I have to change because this is affecting everybody in my family. And I learned a lot through that journey as well with my dad going to rehab, because we did have to go to like family counseling. And I started to realize why I was in the position that I was in, because there were just certain roles that people in families with substance abuse adopt. And for me, I was the rebellious one. My sister was the overachiever. And it just really helped me just deal with where I was at the moment, understanding that, it's not necessarily that I want to blame my father or anything, but that is just life. And this is human behavior. And these are the paths that we take, right? And so me and my dad, we always had this similar anniversary time. So the time that I was in the military was also the time that my dad was sober and clean, because he told us about that in August. He left for rehab in September. He was there for 30 days and he came back home in October. And then the following month in November is whenever I was going off to basic training. So we kind of just both turned over a new leaf at the same time, right? So I go into basic training, and you know how like you don't get to touch your bank account or whatever, or you don't like really see your bank account while you're in basic training.
Yep.
And I remember getting out of basic training, and I had like $1,100 in my bank account. I was like, oh my God. I was like, man, okay, this is starting off good. I was like, I'm rich, right? With my $1,100. And I'll never forget like my first thing that I bought. I remember I bought a black Coach purse from Dillard's, and I just thought I was popping, okay, with that purse. And I finished off basic training. Then I went to, and I had a really good basic training. Like I became an element leader. I had won multiple awards. We ended up winning. Like I never was like a runner. Like I was struggling in the debt or whatever program. And here I am running a 4x4 in basic training, like winning and stuff. And so I was like, okay, I was just really gaining a lot of confidence, back in myself because of the failures that I had. And, people talk, and I really felt like I was redeeming myself because my mom and dad got so much crap from, just me acting a fool whenever I was younger, maybe people saying that I wasn't ever going to do anything with myself or make it out of Port Arthur or really make anything of myself because I had pretty much effed up everything, right? So I was really starting to regain a lot of confidence when I was in basic training, because not only was I there and I was doing it, but I was excelling above the rest of my peers too. So get out of basic training. I actually had to redo Warrior Week too, because I failed the whole gas mask part. Yeah, that was fun.
Wait. What do you guys do for that?
Okay, so for Warrior Week, like we go out into the fields and we like stay in tents, and they have you do all kinds of different stuff. Like we're eating MREs the whole time we're there. I don't know if they still do that because I went to basic training in 2004. November 29th, 2004 is whenever I left. So I don't know if they still do that, but I think we were out there for like 5 or 7 days. I don't even remember.
So is that like the end of basic training?
Yeah.
Final, okay. Yeah. I know all the services like their one.
It's like the culmination. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I failed. Like, I'm almost done. And then I get there. And the way I failed was because, so like when you come out of the gas chamber, they call the whole red alarm attack, right? Well, when I took, and this is the reason why you guys always have to put your gas mask back in the way that they tell you to, because I didn't put it in right. So when I came out of the gas chamber and I got snot coming all out everywhere, and they're like red alarm attack, and I go to take my gas mask out and it's like stuck and I can't get it out in time. So I'm trying to don my mask and I don't get it in the first, because they like count down or whatever, right? So I don't get it. Then you get another try. I still don't get it. And so they're like, yeah, you're going to have to come back. And I'm like, what? I got to come back to this?
That's funny.
I have to redo Warrior Week.
Navy gas chamber is like, you're barely in there that long. But in our final thing, it's called battle stations. It's like impossible to fail, because even if you screw up one thing, they're like helping you through it. Like I think I screwed up like 5 different things. Granted,
really?
I went 2015 is when I went, and I can
See, that was hard on us back in the day,
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that all the services are probably like that now, where they're like helping you through
I believe it.
So yeah, I don't know. I didn't do Air Force, so mine was way different. But that's interesting. I'm like, you failed. What? Like
I was distraught. Do you hear me? I had to go back and I had to do the gas chamber again. So I went to the gas chamber twice. So I finally passed it though. I got through it or whatever. I still I still like graduated with my group and everything. And then I went to tech school at Keesler Air Force Base. And my school was like really long. I worked in precision measurement equipment laboratory, which is calibrations. Very nerdy, okay? Very boring. But I was good at it. I always was just drawn to like attention to detail. I have a lot of like OCD traits. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And like I said, I always wanted to really excel academically and intelligently. Like I just really wanted to be smart. Okay. I didn't want to just be cute. I want to be smart too. Okay. So I was going through this whole thing back then. All right. I go there. My school was like super long. It was like 9 months, right? So I'm pretty much like permanent party while I'm in tech school. And I finished off there. And really, Biloxi was very similar to where I was from. It was kind of country. It was really slow. And this was pre-Katrina. So all the casinos were still there. It was fun. And then like I had been known even since like I was younger, I always had my sister's ID. So I was like going out and stuff. I remember one time I saw my MTL in the club. I was like, and luckily he was cool. He didn't say nothing.
I feel like that's just the thing though in military schools. Like it's just kind of a unspoken
like
thing.
If I see you, I didn't see you. You didn't see me, I didn't see you.
Right.
So I made it through with that. And, I flew under the radar the whole time I was in school. I kept my nose clean. I never got in trouble. So I'm sure he wasn't like, okay, this girl's not out here like causing any problems or anything. So he let me make it. I got out of there. And then my first duty station was at Nellis. And I actually got stuck. I'm actually still here. I'm still in Las Vegas. But it was a great first assignment. It was a huge culture shock for me being from the South and coming out here to the West Coast, and everybody was getting hyphy. And I was like, what is that? Because this is 2005, mind you. And after about 2 to 3 months, I was right along with them. I actually didn't even like it when I first got here. And it's so funny that I ended up being stuck here because I wasn't trying to leave when I was like a younger airman. So I would definitely encourage the younger airmen to move around and get your orders and change your duty stations before you're married and you have kids and you have these ties that may actually stop you from being able to move bases, you know? So the whole time when I was single and I could move, I was like, nah, I like it out here. I'm chilling. Like, I'm good. Don't send me nowhere. And then as I grew, I was just like, I want to leave. Like, I want to experience other bases. Number one, because regardless of how great I was doing in my job, I had became senior airman below the zone. I pretty much flew through all the ranks. I was like a stellar airman, right? Fives across my EPRs, even once we changed to the new rating system, promote now, all that stuff, right? But I had only been at one base. And, you know, when you're doing your thing, haters are going to hate. So it's like, that was like the one thing that people would always, I felt like, hold against me. Well, you only been at this base. Well, you're only been at this base. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this dude's been at 6 bases and he's still an idiot. So what does that mean? Like, what are you saying? And I really didn't get over that until I went to the board for Master Sergeant, which is E7. And I actually had the highest board score out of everybody who went to the board with me, who all had been at least 5 years longer than me. So at that point, I stopped believing what everybody was saying and telling me. But it had really held me back for a long time where I was questioning myself. Well, am I missing something? You know, do I not know as much as I think I know? Like, it was just one of those things that kind of messed with my confidence a little bit, you know? So I would always recommend for, you know, airmen to move around and take the opportunities that they can whenever they, you know, don't have kids or a husband or whatever, because that's whenever it started being hard for me to, even once I was getting orders, they were getting canceled because I had 2 children who were on the Exceptional Family Member Program, which is a medical program to make sure that any gaining base has the medical facilities for your family, right? And because my 2 youngest kids were preemies, yeah, they were Q coded up the wazoo. So they had so many different codes. Even though they were fine, they had a lot of follow-ups that they needed to have through those doctors. And so they were still coded with needing that care. And that really stopped me from being able to go to any bases. So I'm going all through the ranks or whatever, thinking I'm hot, you know, getting my BTZ, getting all the awards or whatever, but I'm not going outside of my career field. I'm not really doing anything outside of being a calibration technician or a supervisor or whatever. So I did start realizing that professionally I had to develop and I needed to get outside. But because I had all this other stuff going on personally, it was kind of like holding me back. And I think being the type of person that I am, I drank the Kool-Aid, man. Like, when it came to Air Force, I was like blue. I bled blue. So anything they told me, like, I was with it. Okay. So when it came to integrity first, service before self, excellence in all you do, like, I was always putting myself last. I used to actually envy people who are just so about themselves and, you know, trying to advance themselves. And I don't know if it just came from possibly being a mom too. I just always was fostering people. Like, you know, I think that what kept me in the military as long as it did was just the opportunity to be able to lead and mold airmen, be able to, you know, help these people who are not everybody is coming in, you know, at 18, really knowing how to adapt to a military lifestyle. So, and I understood that, especially where I came from, this was like a huge opportunity for me because, like I said, I had $1,100 in my bank account. I had a car. I had my own place. To me, I had it going on. All right. I had a job, like, and I couldn't say that for my friends and my classmates and people that I left behind. You know, some of my friends were crackheads by the time they was 22. So it was just a very humbling experience for me. And I was very thankful for everything that I had. So I was always trying to get people to, yeah, you know what? You signed up for this, you're here. There's nothing really that you can do except for find a silver lining until it's time for you to go. If you get to the end of this enlistment and this isn't what you want for you, then you can go. But until then, hey, you're going to have to make the best of the time that we have here together. So I always try to make sure that my airmen were having fun. If it's anything, anybody who ever worked with me, for me, or whatever, was that we always had a good time. You know, I was always the crap catcher, you know. I never really wanted anything to rain down on my people. I was always playing that middleman, but that takes a toll on you over time, you know, always being the person that people are coming to, always being a caretaker, just really taking on everything. And then not to mention, I had a whole family at home. I had children that I was trying to raise. I had a husband. I had, you know, I had baby daddies and stuff, you know. So I'm trying to juggle like all of these things, and with really not enough coping mechanisms and enough, just never having enough of that just because of the way that I grew up, you know. I think mental health is such a huge topic now, but back then it just wasn't. A lot of us didn't even know that we had trauma and mental health issues back then, you know? And so I didn't realize that part of all of that I was doing was because I was conditioned to be that way from watching my mother, you know, enable my father, who's an alcoholic, you know, and be there to pick up all the pieces, be there to, you know, clean up all the messes, never really put myself first, always putting myself last. And eventually, as I started to grow into my womanhood, I started realizing the toll that was taking on me, right? But I didn't know why. I knew I was having issues, but I wasn't quite sure as to why. I didn't know that it was because I was being so self-sacrificing, you know?
I think this is a lot of the biggest issue about having kids come into the military at 18 years old is that we haven't processed, you know, I didn't join at 18, but you haven't processed your life at 18, right? And so when you're thrust into these positions of authority, because they say you're a leader from day one, and then we're thrust into all these lifestyle changes, you're going to, you know, 3 different bases in such a short time, from boot camp to school, your permanent duty station, and you're learning all these things. Your brain can't really catch up until you're later on. And then you're like, oh my God,
I'm exhausted.
Yeah. You're mentally exhausted. You're physically exhausted. And it really does take a toll on you. So I think that's such a good point that you bring up, is that most people coming into the military, I truly believe, have trauma, that maybe they're escaping from something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and we don't talk about this. Should be talked about very early on. And it isn't.
In the FTAC program, right? When you get there, like, hey, we know a lot of you guys ended up being here because you're trying to make a better way for yourself. You know, you may be escaping something, you know, and that really is the way you clarified it is just really on point, because I recently went to a retirement ceremony and ran into a girl I was deployed with in 2007. Didn't even remember her name, but she remembered my face. And she said, hey, because she had just hit 20 years and she made a post on Facebook the other day with a lot of pictures and stuff, and some of them from the deployment. Go to this retirement ceremony. She's like, hey, were you in IUD in 2007? And I'm like, do I know you? And she was like, I'm pretty sure you're in one of my pictures. And she pulls it up and she's like, we're kicking it in the pool, right? Because in 2007, there was no Wi-Fi. You had to wait in a long line to get a morale call or get on a computer. All right. So everybody was kicking it back then. We weren't wearing regular clothes. We was all in uniform 24/7. And so the camaraderie was like really high. So she showed me this picture and I mean, I'm blown away, but she was just telling me how, you know, she is a master sergeant. She's an E7, and in her career field, which is contracting, there just isn't a lot of promotion, you know, and she's at 20 years, but she wants to make senior before she retires, you know, and she was just talking about how she felt like she had kind of moved kind of slow. She did retrain because back then she was like LRS or something. And there was a chief that was there that was emceeing the ceremony. Real cool chick, right? She was a chief master sergeant out at Barksdale. And she was saying, it took me forever to, she was like, I was like a super staff sergeant. She was like, you can't tell me nothing about a staff sergeant. He was like, I knew staff sergeant up and down because I was a staff sergeant forever. And one point that she made that I didn't really realize is that she's like, it's okay to take your time. She was like, because a lot of those people who are fast burners and they burn through all of these ranks, by the time they get up there, girl, they tired. They have done so much in such a short amount of time that they are burnt out. Okay. And I never realized that that was me. Because I was just trying to excel, like I was now adopting the overachiever role versus the rebellious role that I had whenever I was younger, because now I wanted to prove to my father, you didn't mess me up, man. I'm okay. Everything that you did, it's all right. I'm still good. Whenever that wasn't my problem to take on. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't my issue to fix for my father. If he felt that way, that's on him. But I had adopted that. And I was like, I'm going to make him proud, make him, understand that, because I love my dad. And so I'm like, I'm going to make him see that everything that he didn't jack me up. I'm still good, But with that comes the burnout, and a lot of us can attest that in the military, a lot of us don't feel appreciated for everything that we're putting in, It is service before yourself. But if you have no self to give, then you have, if there's no self, then there's no service before self. You have to have some kind of self still there. And I learned that the hard way, So getting to my first base, like I said, hit the ground running, burning through all the ranks and everything, being stuck in one place, not real. And whenever I made master, phone calls started happening, Now all of a sudden I can move. Like, y'all knew how to do this the whole time? Like, you just had to call somebody? Oh, well, why nobody called nobody for me? Nobody, I'm so great. I'm doing an awesome job. Everybody's giving me all these accolades, but nobody's helping me. Nobody's helping me. Okay. Y'all are gonna keep me here to make things better, praise me and all of that. But this isn't what's best for me professionally. I'm not growing here. I'm a good asset and everything like that. But whenever it comes to my professional growth, it's being stunted. And that's when the resentment starts to set in, and my whole gratefulness that I had being in the military just started to change, Also, and this is all in my mind at the time, I do have a different mindset about the things that were going on back then, but this is where I was at that time, is that I started to feel a little resentment. I started to feel like, dang, I've been looking out for all of y'all. I've been holding everybody up. I've been doing what I'm supposed to do for you guys so that your EPRs look great. And we're winning all these awards and, we're doing great as a lab and as a whole. But why hasn't anybody been looking out for me? Like, I'm starting to realize it's that easy to, get somebody to another base. Like, once I became a senior NCO, right? When I wasn't even all the way a senior NCO yet, I had just gotten a line number. That was it. I actually never made it to put it on. That's the rest of the story. So through this resentment, I was just starting to feel like, one, I was being taken advantage of. Two, I felt like I was the only one who cared about the people who were beneath me. I was constantly fighting. I was constantly being the crap catcher, just always constantly trying to protect everybody and sacrificing myself. I started, a lot of mom guilt started to build up in my life. I had gotten married. I had had another baby. So I had 2 kids before I actually met my husband. And I had just finally started to feel like my life was becoming a little stable. Like I'm married. I have a real family now. Like, I'm not out here surviving as a single mom and trying to do what I got to do for my kids. I felt more supported, at home. And then I started to realize how the military kind of conflicted with that, as far as being a mom. And it's not the same where you go to work. Being a working mom is already, difficult, right? And I started to realize that I couldn't be the mom that I wanted to be, I couldn't be there for everything because service before self, I'm working late. I'm going in early. I'm working late because that's just who I was. Like I was going to give my 100% to my service, and I started to feel really guilty about that. Anytime my kids were having issues, and I would blame myself. Anytime anything happened, I was just blaming me all the time, whether it was work stuff, whether it was stuff with my kids' fathers, with in my marriage, like I was just blaming me. And I was just really starting to want an escape. My husband has separated, my best friend has separated, and I'm looking at them and they're like still like, okay. And I'm like, dang, y'all make it like if we get out, then we're going to be living under a bridge or something, And so, and this had been my whole life since I was 18 years old. This is all I knew my whole adult life. And, I knew I was smart. I knew I had a lot of potential, but I felt like it was all supposed to be used in the military at the time. And I wasn't going where I wanted to go in the military. I knew that I was never going to make chief if I wasn't able to move bases, because guess what? Everybody's telling me, you don't know anything because you have only been on one base. So I'm like, okay. And even though going to the board helped me, kind of remove that a little bit, the people who were around me and the people who were my peers and in my career and everything, they were all still saying the same thing. And so I knew that it was going to be an upward battle, like for myself, especially being a very assertive female of color, and being in a very male dominated career field where everybody's socially awkward would be the best way to describe it. Okay. And so I just didn't really fit in with that, and it was difficult for me. I always rub people the wrong way, not intentionally, but I was always called aggressive. And the one thing that I always felt like was that, well, and I would definitely voice this, was that if I was a man, would you say that I was aggressive? Because no, you'd say I'm a go-getter. You'd say he's very, about his business and all of this. But because I'm a woman now, I'm aggressive. No, I'm assertive. I'm not aggressive. I
love that you voiced that though, because women hear this all the time in service.
I know it.
It's a constant thing. And one point I wanted to make to what you said previously, you mentioned surviving. I think that so many of us in the military, men and women, but a lot of women are just constantly in survival mode. And I give props to any woman that is a mom on top of being in the military, because I had my baby after the military, and the amount of work that goes into raising a child. I could not imagine having to get up to go to work early, taking care of people after work. The military is a 24-hour job.
And it is. It comes home with you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of moms especially take on that empathetic side, because you have this side to you that maybe the men don't understand, because I don't think you really can understand it until you're a mom. But then women just naturally have this nurturing side, mom or not. And so, you get this, you're aggressive. Maybe you're just passionate. Maybe you just want to make a change or bring something different to the table, because the military tries to make everyone the same, but we want to embrace diversity. So there's a problem here, right?
Yeah. And it's like, if you're on that end of the spectrum, it's a problem. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum where you're timid and you're not vocal and you're too feminine, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you can't do anything. Like, so it's like, dude, which one do y'all want? So it's definitely a thing that you have to navigate whenever you're in the military, especially if you're in a male-dominated career field, because it may not be the same when you're working at the hospital or the dentist office or whatever. But when you're in maintenance, baby, it's different.
Right.
Okay. So, and for me, I like I said, I was always a very assertive person. Like I didn't come from being, like coddled or anything like that. I would say that I was a little rough around the edges, so for me, I was able to maybe navigate it a little more successfully than others, but still having to deal with the slack, still being the way that I was, because now you're too much, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, what? So it was just all these things going on around me, right? Trying to be a mom. And it was just something that switched for me after I had my last son. I was just like, I'm tired of this. I want to be there for my kids. I want to be a mother. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I even get emotional to talk about it. And then I want to say it really started with my middle daughter because she was a preemie, right? And I remember that was probably one of the hardest things that I went through. And I am thankful that I was in the military whenever it happened because, that healthcare, like the things that I would have had to come out of pocket for, like her bed was $100,000 alone. And so I would always try to find the silver lining, you know what I'm saying? Tangible wise, but there's some intangible things that you just can't get around, and it's that trauma that resurfaces through all of these different situations that I have been going through since I was about 16 years old. I didn't even realize that when I was 15, 16 years old, that I was depressed. That was part of the reason why I was skipping out on school and doing all this other stuff, because I did not like my family life. Okay. And it wasn't, and I didn't even know anything was wrong with my family life. I thought my family life was normal because that was all I knew my whole life. But it was actually having a very profound effect on me and how I moved in society and in the world. And I didn't like it, but I didn't even realize it, but I had no coping mechanisms. I had no the first bit of coping in counseling that I received was when I was 18 years old and my dad went to rehab. So imagine all the trauma that I've already experienced, up until that point. And I'm just now learning, oh, this is why this is this way, and then I'm thrust into the military where it's like trauma more, right? Different relationships, like I spoke of having, my other kids' fathers and, being a single mom and, dealing with all of these things while still trying to be in the military. So I was, I believe I was already kind of like in that space where I was just getting tired, and I was looking for an escape. And so I had actually volunteered to deploy again because I had then had my third set of orders canceled. And I was just like, man, I'm tired of being here. Like, I want to do something different. Like, I need to do something. So I had actually volunteered to go. While I was gone, my husband actually got in trouble and got kicked out of the military. So that was just like, oh man, what am I going to do? Like now I have to, I was actually coming up on my separation and I decided to stay because I felt like I had to. I felt like, I don't know what's going to happen with him. I don't know. He's pretty much put his livelihood on the line. And now how is our family going to survive? So I felt obligated to stay in because I didn't really, I know I had always told myself if I was ever straddling the fence that I was going to stay in. Right. And I'm glad I don't have that same mentality now, but that fear is like a ball and chain, it keeps you there and you feel safe to an extent, but really you're not, And when I decided to stay and I went, that was whenever the Air Force had actually started doing a lot of downsizing and they were starting to get rid of people and they were asking people to hit the button if they wanted to get out. And, I actually was not on the chopping board because I had just made tech sergeant. And so if you had just recently got promoted, you were safe, right? But the Air Force didn't know that everybody was tired of their, okay? And before they knew it, too many people was hitting that button, right? But it started to really change the culture of the Air Force as well, right? Then a lot of people were feeling resentment. A lot of people were feeling unappreciated. A lot of people were feeling like I should just cut my losses now. They don't give me, I'm just a number. You know what I'm saying? And that culture started to really brew and build. And then it was building while I was in the desert, right? Where we're already being deprived. We're already kind of like in a different space. We're away from our families. We're, just in this space. And then I had this supervisor at the time. Oh my goodness. I will say that he was the catalyst of me going down this path of, I don't think I want to be here no more. And, from having the previous deployment into that one, it really goes to show you that units really rely on who the leadership is. It can make or break an entire deployment if you have the wrong person in charge, So in his defense, he was ignorant to a lot of things because he was not married and he did not have any children. Okay. And so for him, there were just certain sacrifices he didn't understand. And for me, being a mother, being older, and being in that space and having airmen who had families, I was just a little more empathetic and understanding. And so as long as the mission was still getting done, I was trying to make sure that everybody was still sound, not just in the job, but morale is such a huge, important thing that a lot of leadership looks over, and they don't really understand that, for me, it was never hard. I always had the respect of my subordinates because I always respected them. I always would tell them when I would have my sessions, I would lay out my expectations from the beginning, and I would let everybody know that, look, at the end of the day, you don't work for me, you working with me. Okay. We're working together to make this happen. Okay. Because if you don't get it done, I'm still going to have to answer for it. You know what I'm saying? If I don't get it done, it's going to trickle down to you. So how do we make this a successful partnership? What do you need? Where are you struggling? Anytime even I had to get on somebody, it was never a slap on the wrist and you did this, and that, and then we're moving on. No. Why did you do that? What do we need to put in place so that you don't do that again? What's the corrective action that you feel like would actually help you? I don't want you to be in trouble again. I don't even really want to have, you think I have time to be sitting up here writing up paperwork? Like, I don't have time for that. I have other stuff to do, And so I always had the respect of my subordinates. And with this certain flight chief, oh my God, I just could not deal with him. I could not figure it out. I'm just like, okay, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing and you're still unsatisfied. What do you want? What is it that you want? Why do you always have a problem? Like, are you just angry? Like, are you going through some things? Are you jealous? Like, what is the problem? And it just made that deployment so difficult for me because he made it very difficult for me to take care of my people. If I tried to stay back and let them go early, because, these people working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and they have families. So if I'm going to cut them out an hour early because the person who's coming to pick everybody up, they're going to hop in the truck and go back with them. Not like, we took the whole day off. An hour early that they're leaving, I'm still here, Manny. There's nothing, just because it's going to be an issue. And I was just like, that doesn't really make sense to me because you want this job to stay done. We pretty much had a revolution on that deployment, right? And I never wanted to be that supervisor. I never wanted to be that person. I was always about respecting the people who were in charge of me, whether I like it or not. At the end of the day, you're the one that's in charge. I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I don't have to agree with it, but I'm going to do it. Okay. And I was always playing that middle person. I think that middle management is probably the hardest position when you're in the military because you're past being buddies with people that are beneath you, right? But you're still not in charge, right? So not only are you dealing with what's coming down too, you're literally getting it from both ways. So I think that in that middle management area, you actually deal with a lot more because you're dealing with what's coming up from the bottom and what's coming down from the top. that like E6 area, like, you know? And so that deployment was really hard for me. And on that deployment, I had children and I was married. So it was a completely different dynamic from whenever I was there before. I was single, no kids, whatever, right? So I was missing my family already. And then I was just dealing with this, what I felt like terrible management at the time, because if we're meeting everything we're supposed to be meeting, why aren't we getting any type of recognition or appreciation or any type of just some empathy, Lord? Come on, you know? Like, and he was, and you know, they may have never noticed it because I was the one that was catching the crap all the time. I was the one that was being called in the office. I remember having a very big argument with my lab chief at the time because I had pretty much gotten to the point. I never wanted to be that supervisor that was going along with the airmen, you know what I'm saying? But it was just, it made absolutely no sense to me that, you know, we just started a revolution. We just stopped working. So once the backlog started going up, being a little higher, you know, and, you know, because you're upset that we have 98% quality rate versus 100. So let's take our time. We're going to take our time to make sure that we don't make any mistakes and that we're perfect. Okay. And we're going to see how this backlog is going to look, because you're completely forgetting that there are still humans in here. And there's something that's called human error that is going to happen regardless. And the 98% is not bad whenever you have an under 1 day backlog. Okay. So let's go ahead and slow down so that we can get 100%. And when this backlog hit 3 days, let me see what you're talking about then, you know, and needless to say, we won. So, but it was actually a very risky, you know, thing to do. I was going to be the one who was going down. Okay. No other airman was going down. It was going to be me. But I was that passionate about it because I knew how hard they were working. I knew everything that they were doing and I knew what they deserved. They deserve more respect than that, you know? And so that was kind of like the start of it. And it just kind of, when I got back, you know, with the culture changing, with their just not, you know, they started to have like the Air Force Hunger Games because then they changed the whole rating system. And now we had the promote now and the must promotes and the promote. And now everybody was like neck for neck. Just the culture was changing, you know, and I was just getting sick and tired of it. You know, I already had all these issues I was dealing with, and I had actually started going to non-medical counseling, right? It was something that was called MFLAC, and it was not documented, but they were licensed mental health professionals that were providing counseling. But, you know, it's not bad now, but back then, you know, going to mental health there was a huge stigma around it. And I actually found out why personally, because my last 3 assignments were canceled due to mental health. Right. So, but I wasn't mad about it because I wasn't trying to go to Korea, honestly. And you know, because I was already to that point to where I'm like, I want to be with my kids. Every time y'all trying to send me somewhere, it's without my kids. Like, I want to go somewhere, but I don't want to keep leaving them. You know, and so I had started to actually go to the MFLAC or whatever, and I was starting to get counseling, and I was really learning some good ways to cope with everything that I had going on, because at that time I was basically tired of dealing with my husband, tired of dealing with my kids, tired of dealing with my baby daddies, tired of dealing with my bosses, tired of dealing with my job. I was shot. Okay. I had not been taking care of myself. Everything that I had ever done was for everybody else. And I had nothing to show for it. I was unhappy. And I felt very trapped. And I was just looking for a way out. At that point, I was desperate. I really didn't care what it was going to look like. I knew I needed help. And so I had started seeing this counselor, and she was great. I mean, she helped me open up my mind and realize that I wasn't trapped, that I had other avenues that I could pursue. And that's whenever I started looking into, I had started interviewing for other jobs outside of my career field on the base, right? I had just started looking at other ways to get out. But the problem is that because I was the one that was on station the longest at my rank, anytime orders dropped, I was getting them. And I was getting them over and over and over again. And it was a constant cycle. But with having an assignment, that also makes you ineligible for a lot of other things. So I was getting the orders, which was making me ineligible to apply for any job on base, for any extracurricular, outside, extra duty, any of that stuff, because I had an assignment. But assignments and medical are not connected. So I would get that, and then I would not get cleared through medical. My orders would get canceled. And guess what? It's time for orders to come out again. I went through that cycle for about 2, almost 3 years, where I was basically getting orders, and it was cutting me off from any opportunities. They would get canceled. And then I'd be back with orders again. And I would not, and that happened to me 3 times in a row, right? As I'm going through this medical counseling and stuff, and I'm also not wanting to be in the military. I'm trying to do what I can so that I can, I was just trying not to throw my hands up in the air and give up. I was like, I'm going to find a way for me to stay in and be happy. Like, just because this situation isn't working for me doesn't mean that if I cross train or if I get another job that I won't be happy, So I was trying to find these ways out, but I was just getting blocked and blocked and blocked. I was just not having good luck. Okay. And so I was finally able to, because I really didn't want to get out. I was even looking at like commissioning and all this stuff, and I was just trying to find a way. But something crossed my path, and it was called Palace Chase. And it's where you were separated, but you did the rest of your enlistment. You had to double the rest of your enlistment in the reserves. So I had about 3 years left in my enlistment. I was like, well, I could do 6 years in the reserves. That's cool. So, and this lady had really helped me through all of these different rejections that I was getting. She was just keeping me motivated to just try something else. I finally decided to apply for this Palace Chase thing, right? In the midst of that, I get a phone call, and it's my functional manager at the time. And he's like, hey, here goes these phone calls. This is before I made master though. He's like, hey, I know you've been at this base for a while. So, I just wanted to try to see if you wanted to go to any of these 4 bases. Like, I know you've been here for a long time. Just want to help you out, help me out, not help him out. That's really what was going on though. What I come to find out was that AFPC was not allowing him to move any master sergeants to that base because we were overloaded with tech sergeants. And they said, hey, somebody's going to make master. So we're not giving you a master, but we needed one bad. Okay. Because none of them other techs was about to make master. And I was the lowest on the totem pole. And I was literally working over all of them, which is another thing that happens in the military, right? When you work hard and you do good, even though them getting paid more than you, guess who's getting all the responsibility and getting all of the work is not the people who's been there the longest, the one who's willing to sacrifice themselves. Okay. I used to hate them, but now I understand they're way smarter than me. They knew better than to take that on. They was like, oh, she's eager. Let her do all the work. She ain't getting paid. We getting paid. She willing to do all. Let her do it. She's dumb. So he calls me, tells me that, but I found out later on what was really going on, right? But at the time I had already applied for the Palace Chase program. So I was like, they say, you don't tell the chief no. So I wasn't going to tell him no. I was going to blame my husband. So I was like, let me talk to, my husband and find out or whatever. And then my boss at the time comes and he's like, what you going to do or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm Palace Chasing. Like, I'm not trying to go to he's like, wait a minute. He's like, okay, when a chief calls you and tells you that, he's like, I'm just telling you, like, it ain't a matter of if you want to go. He asking you where you want to go. You going.
But I hate how you have no time to make these major life decisions. It happens so much. They're literally like, hey,
like, you to think about it over the weekend.
This and come back the rest of your life, but we're going to give you a day or 2 to think about it. Like, what?
That was it. I had a weekend. When I came back on that Monday, he ended up calling me. I told him, hey, I guess I'll go to Travis, and he could kind of hear it in my voice that I wasn't happy with it. And he's like, are you sure? Like, is everything okay? I guess he was probably thinking it was something with my husband because I blamed him for everything, right? He's probably like, are you sure your family's okay with this? And so I finally was honest and I was like, hey, like, actually, no, we're not okay with this. I did not want to say these things because you don't say this. And they tell you that all the time. But I was like, no, like I'm blue. You feel me? I'm blue. I'm all blue. So I don't go with what everybody is saying and you don't tell the chief. No, the chief is blue like me. Like he gonna do the right thing. No. So I tell him like, well, really, I have an application in for Palace Chase. I'm thinking about getting out of the military. Like this is actually, I'm just telling you, like I was under the impression that you ain't asking me if I want to go, but where I want to go, And he was like, no, absolutely not. Like, if this isn't what you want for your family or what you need, like, like totally understanding. And I'm like, oh my God, like he understands. Like, little did I know that was some BS. Okay. He was like, yeah, this isn't, what you want to do, whatever. And I was just like, cool, get off the phone with him. Right. I go home. And I remember I was on urinalysis duty at the time. And so I wasn't at the shop. I wasn't checking my email every day. And that night, something made me go get on my email. I opened my email. I got an assignment notification. I'm like, what the hell? How do I get an assignment notification? Shouldn't I be coded if I'm applying for Palace Chase? I'm like, how does this work? Like, I'm so confused. Open it up, Korea. So after I told him no, guess what? He gave me orders to Korea. But one thing that he didn't know was that I had mental health issues, right? So guess what? That started another cycle of him giving me orders to Korea 3 times. Okay? He gave me orders to Korea 3 times to teach me a lesson that you don't say no to achieve. Okay. He probably assumed that he probably didn't know that I had that stuff. And then he probably thought that came up whenever I got the orders, like as an escape mechanism. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I'm going to go to mental health now so that I can't go to Korea. But I didn't find out.
This is what leadership thinks when it comes to mental health issues. But the thing was that I didn't even find out that I was disqualified to go to Korea until he gave me the orders. And that's when I found out that you can't go if you have any mental health within 3 years because they don't have the facilities for you. They're already backed up. People was killing themselves in Korea all the time because of being away from family, being in a remote location or whatever. So they were not taking anybody who had any type of mental health issues, right? But on his end, it looks like, oh, she's just trying to get out of it, because of this and that. He didn't even know that I was already going to non-medical counseling prior to that. Right. Through my mental health thing, though, I did have a really great guy, which is so funny. When I first met, I was like, what is this old white dude going to help me with? Because at first when I went to mental health, it was like this young redheaded lady and it was a lady. And so I was like relating and I'm just like, oh, this is going to be good for me. And then when they give me the actual doctor, it's him. I'm like, what is me and this man about to talk about? And, I should not have been prejudiced like that because he really gave me so many tools and he was awesome. He really helped me even once all the bad stuff happened. Right. So I became extremely miserable because I didn't know that I wasn't going to have to go to Korea. I actually thought I was going to have to go. And my son wasn't even 1 year old yet. And like I told you, I was getting to the point where I was just like, I want to be with my family. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So this was literally in my mind at the time. I had created this mental prison where this was like death for me. I'm like, this is literally the one thing that I was trying to run away from is this. Like, this is why I was in mental health in the first place. And then this is what happens. And so this turns into like a little cycle or whatever. I would literally see my kids and I would just start crying. Like my mental health completely deteriorated. It went from me having, needing some coping mechanisms to me needing medication. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. I had severe anxiety. I started having anxiety attacks, stuff I had never experienced before in my life.
The medication that I had got put on initially had me like tripping out. I was seeing stuff. I was totally against being on medication, but my doctor had told me, like, he's like, if I were to weigh the side effects and where you're going, he was like, I will go with the side effects versus leaving you untreated. And then because I was very afraid of the side effects of the medicine, he convinced me to start it. And then I started the medicine and I start seeing all kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not taking this again. He's like, please. He's like, just try another family. Let's try another medication. He was like, because he was really concerned about me, So I did. The medication did start to help me. I had a very bad chemical imbalance, and I was starting to get better, but through that process, I was still getting orthorexia and still getting them canceled. And I was just in this place where I was just like, these are never going to get better for me. Like, I'm just going to be stuck here forever. Like, every positive silver lining that I have tried to find has been completely shot down. And at the time, I just had really built this mental prison where I was miserable and I just wanted to be out. So guess what I started doing? Started self-medicating. And, people around me were smoking and doing all that type of stuff or whatever. And, I just really stopped caring, you know what I'm saying? And I really didn't care if I stayed in the military or if I didn't, but really that was like the only thing that was helping me. And I was starting to tell myself, like, man, they should really get this to people. Because I felt like it was the only reason why I was surviving was because I was smoking every now and then, And so I'm able to hold out long enough because, like I said, I felt like that was the only reason why I was even surviving was because I was self-medicating, and I had told myself that I was like, my only way out is if I make master. And I had really started studying really hard, and because I started realizing, they be making phone calls and stuff like, oh, okay. And so I was like, I'm going to do this because the previous year, like I said, I had the highest board score. I didn't make it, but I had the highest board score. So I studied my butt off and I worked my hardest for that year. I mean, I was in everything. You understand me? Every project, everything that they had going on in that base, I was in that thing because I was going to make sure that my EPR was going to give me the highest board score. And it did. I got the highest board score in my career field the year that I made master. And it's so funny that, your destiny does not wait for you, and it's like, I was never meant to stay in the Air Force. So even though I felt like, oh my God, things are finally starting to look up for me, things are going to change, I had already manifested my destiny. I had already was so miserable that I had manifested that I was going to be out. So when that stuff started happening, I was thinking like, oh, this is going to be my ticket. When I ended up making master, one of my old tech school instructors ended up calling me because he was now the functional at the training command, AATC. He calls me. He's like, yeah, now that you made master, whatever, I got this position. You want to come here? Do. And I was like, yeah. Mind you, this whole time I had never knew what was going on behind closed doors with that chief. I thought I just had bad luck and kept getting orders to Korea. I knew he was in charge of it, but at the same time, I wouldn't believe that that's what was really happening because I would never do that. You know what I'm saying? So he calls me. He's like, yeah. So after I say yeah to it and everything, he's like, but there's just one thing I want to tell you. And I was like, what? He's like, well, I called your functional before I called you, right? Says his name. He had a nickname back then, that guy. And he's like, and mind you, this guy knew me from when I was in tech school. And he knew me. I had went back there for training and stuff, right? So this guy is like, so yeah, I called him and I told him, what I'm trying to do and give you the position or whatever. And he was like, well, good luck with that. She only wants to do what works for her. Mind you, I had spent my entire career not giving a damn about myself. And he knew that. He knew the way I worked. He knew people that worked with me. My reputation across my career field was not that. But because I never kissed that dude whenever he came around, and because I told him no, that was who I was to him. You know what I'm saying? And on top of the fact that he probably thought that my mental health stuff was like a scam, he's just like, forget her or whatever, right? He's like, but I'll release her or whatever, right? So he tells me that, and that just blew me away. And you know what? I told him, I said, you know what? That's fair enough. He don't know me. If I was him, I probably think the same thing because he don't know nothing about me, you know? And I was like, but at that time, I didn't care because I'm like, you about to give me this position. I don't even give a damn how he feel. He old, crusty. He about to retire. He's not going to even be around, you know? And so I was like, I'm going to continue excelling in my career from this point forward, right? I get this job. So I go on leave. He's working all through this stuff to try to give me this job before, right? I go on leave. Before I go on leave, they piss test me, right? I go on leave. I come back. They piss me again, right? Then I catch on and I'm like, ooh, I must have failed that test before I left. And that is what starts my whole like rest of my or end of my Air Force career, right?
So in Air Force, when they do your analysis with you, do they have like specific people that do it? Or is it because like in the Navy, you just have to be E5 or above to take someone for your analysis, right? So
yeah,
anyone can take anyone. I'm sure there's.
Well, this is the thing. They don't have to take you. So you get what's called your analysis duty. Once you're a staff or above, then they just volunteer. Every unit has to volunteer a person to monitor, right? Because you have to watch them actually pee into the cup, right? But you go on your own. You show up whenever you want to. You have to show up within 2 hours of them giving you the paperwork, right? So back before when I cared, I used to drink a lot of water. I used to do all kinds of stuff so that I would pass the test. At this point, I did not give a damn. I went and took that test and I didn't give it what came out. Okay. I even told my husband that day, I said, I don't think I'm going to pass this test. He was like, why? I was like, because I didn't really do anything to prepare myself for it.
So you knew.
I was tired.
Yeah.
And even though I had that opportunity come up, I still had these feelings of resentment, you know, and I really didn't know. It still was an uncertainty that if I got to that base, it could still be shitty and I still wouldn't like it, you know? And so I just wasn't all the way in anymore. You know, I wanted to be out. I wanted to be done. I thought I was going to be done until, you know, that order to Korea completely smashed my package that I had for Palace Chase, right? So I get back. Long story short, regardless of my great career path, this is when I started realizing I was just a number. No matter what you do, once you get popped, you're a criminal. The way I went from, you know, being their bestest whatever to basically being a piece of crap was very evident to me that I didn't matter. I never mattered. I was just a number, you know? And I did not get offered an Article 15 like any of my counterparts or any of the other people who had gotten, you know what I'm saying, in trouble or whatever. I was sent to a court-martial. And I was court-martialed and they literally wanted to throw the book at me, okay? In my court-martial, the prosecution was asking for reduction to E1, a 2/3 forfeiture of pay, bad conduct discharge, up to 12 months confinement, and what else? Hard labor. That's what they had on the table for someone who had never gotten in trouble ever once, who was a stellar airman the entire time. That was what they were asking for. That's what the prosecution was asking for. Now, luckily, the jury, you know, they still felt very strongly about convicting me, regardless of whatever the evidence was or whatever. But my sentencing was not that harsh. They ended up, even though I had a line number for E7, I was still at E6. So they ended up taking a strike from me, busting me down to a staff sergeant E5, and they gave me 3 months of hard labor. Now, going up to that, I had already went through the first sergeant symposium. I knew all of my rights, all these different things. And they had tried to execute my sentence before it actually went up to the wing king, which is illegal. They had also moved duties. They had also put me in pretrial confinement under the guise of a duty section change. Normally, when you're in that squadron, they move you out of that squadron because there's a lot of security measures, right? And they put you outside. Well, when I got in trouble, they moved me into it. And I had to get escorted everywhere that I went because I was now in a more secure location. I don't know exactly why things happened the way that they did. I didn't know that I had pissed off that many people, I guess. But I definitely got treated way differently than a friend of mine who had actually gotten popped for a way harder drug just a few months earlier, right? He was never moved. He was never happened to be supervised or escorted or any of that. He was offered an Article 15. I was never, and he had issues in the past. But guess what? He was not a female of color.
It's all about who you are. It is like, let's talk about how there are rapists that get away on way less. There's people that just get
DUIs, all this stuff, and it's like, and I actually had started to dive into a lot of the statistics, and there were articles that were coming out in the Air Force Times about people of color being punished way harder than their other counterparts. And I bear full witness to that. Okay. I also had a friend who worked in legal who was overhearing lots of chatter about my case. And because those people did not know that she was a friend of mine, they ran their mouths a lot. And even to the point to where they apologized to her later once they found out that she was a friend of mine. And it's like, it's crazy the type of stuff that goes on behind closed doors, whenever it comes to this legal system in the military. They don't go by the evidence, they go by what they want to. Okay. And so long story short, I ended up writing a clemency letter to the wing where I identified all of that stuff. I identified that if I were to stay here, you'd have to pay someone to watch me all the time, and how I had already been under pretrial confinement, how I had already been illegally sentenced, and they were executing my sentence prior to my case even closing. And luckily, the wing commander at the time, and all I was asking for was a general discharge, and that I was basically going to go on about my business. Just give me a general and I won't make a fuss of any of this stuff, right? And she actually granted my clemency, got rid of my hard labor, and basically gave me a general discharge. And I was able to still get all of my benefits. And I had before I had gotten out, I had gotten my degree while I was in. I had always knew that whenever I had planned to retire, I would have retired at 38, but I had planned to start my own business whenever I retired, right? So I went to school for business management with a concentration in entrepreneurship and small business. And I used that to start my first business. I did a lot of research. When I was in trouble, I couldn't really work on stuff, so I would be researching. I looked for low overhead cost businesses and what I could start and what I could pay for while I was still getting paid from the military. And I built a photo booth from scratch. Instead of spending about $10,000, $11,000 on buying one, I built it myself for about $3,500. As I was buying piece by piece, the first part that I got was the camera. And so I started really trying my hand at photography because I was like, I've always been a really good iPhone photographer. Like, let's see how this happens, And even from like the beginning of my first shoot to the end, I was a completely different photographer. Like, I was self-taught in all of my photography, and I did it, and I continued to do it. I had my first gig in March of 2018. I had a photo booth gig. I had my first photography client in May of 2018, and I was separated by June of 2018. I was court-martialed in December of 2017, right? I was separated by June, and I just went full head on into my business. I had made great connections still with military people. So I was doing a lot of the holiday parties. I mean, we're in Vegas, so there's tons of conventions, there's all these hotels. So it was just really starting to pick up. I was going to every networking event that I could. Like, I was really determined. I had a big chip on my shoulder because of everything that had happened. And I wanted to prove that. And I had always kind of felt that way when I would have airmen that got in trouble and they would get kicked out. I was always there encouraging them that this is just the end of this chapter. Just because you didn't pan out here doesn't mean that you're a piece of crap. Like, you can go off and start a whole new life. Like, you have everything you need to start over, you know? And so, long story short is, eventually I ended up using my GI Bill because I really realized that I enjoyed when we would do hair, makeup, and photos, everything together. And like I told you, I had a past in beauty. And so I started realizing, like, I really love glamour photography, you know? And I was like, I think I'm going to go. I have this school money that I can't give to my kids because I had a general and I had to hurry up and get out. I'm like, I'm going to use this and be resourceful, you know? So I decided to go to esthetician school. I started esthetician school in January of 2019. And I graduated in June 29th of 2019. And because I had already been in business on my own, I had already knew that once I got out of school, I was like, I'm not going to go get an esthetician job. Like, I'm going to use this to expand my business. And I ended up renting a room for about 6 months. And after that 6 months, I had built up enough clientele and enough money to open my own salon. So in January 2020, I moved into my salon. In the beginning of March of 2020, we had a grand opening, March 7th. And 2 weeks later, we're shut down by COVID. So I just kept, but I just kept facing all these hurdles. But I was like, you know what, this is just here to, like, people have to realize is that, you can get to the mountain by climbing it, or you can take a helicopter to the top, but the journeys are going to be different, and I have found that I find my joy in the process, not necessarily the results, not necessarily in the end, because a lot of times when you get there and you look back and you know that, hey, I went through all of this to get here, it's even sweeter. The victory is even more sweeter, and we opened back up after 2 months. After 2 months of being closed, about 7 months later, we expanded to the other side of the building. We started off with 1,250. Now we're at a 2,500 square foot salon studio. And then that was kind of hard to fill. But eventually we got full occupancy. Like right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other business owners, all female-owned businesses. And if I had not stepped out on my own self, and I would have not only shorted myself, but I would have never had given these people the opportunity to grow their own businesses. It is very rewarding. I am so happy to just give people the opportunity, because what I realized for me is that I gave up a long time ago. I was trying to be so secure. I was staying in the military because I didn't believe that I could be not just emotionally, spiritually, and mentally supported by what I did for a living, but financially, now I'm able to, be supported in all those ways in what I'm doing now. And I realized that I had a huge glass ceiling over me when I was in the military, right? Everything that I thought that I was to the military, I was actually way more to the rest of the world. So it's been such a journey, but we're actually going to be having an open house this Friday. And I am just so happy to bring everybody in and just really look at my baby, like this is my baby. Like I get to show it off. And I've just finished a 21-day. Well, actually I finished it tomorrow. I'll be finishing a 21-day detox where I have cut out so much stuff for 21 days. And I'm so clear. My anxiety is gone. And it has been one of the best gifts that I can give myself for my 36th birthday. And so I'm going to celebrate this Friday once I finish this and just bring everybody into just the whole redemption story, like just coming back from all these trials and tribulations and now to just be so supported, and being able to support other women to not just be able to accept yourself, express yourself, and just be self-aware, take care of yourself. Our whole mission, even in what we do, is stemmed from wanting to help women who are juggling their personal care needs amidst their professional lives, and that's who I used to be when I was in the military. But I didn't have this, I didn't have this place where I could go and let my hair down and talk crap and, leave out with confidence and feeling beautiful. And, I'm always pushing my clients to stand up for themselves, to take care of themselves, and reminding them that you're no good to anybody unless you're taking care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And that is the biggest thing that I want to leave on this podcast, is to make sure you take care of yourself. When you take care of yourself, then everybody else will be taken care of.
It's so true. And I think that, I like to think of every chapter of our life as building skills. You can't embody every part of one chapter of your life. It will leave you feeling lost and broken as you transition to the next chapter. We do not stay in one place forever. I think the military tells so many people that you cannot make it outside the military, but you can. And you, Steph, are just living proof of that. And so I love that you shared your story. I really think you should write a book, honestly.
So this journey of this detox has really, and I wrote this down, and, I'm such a powerful manifester. I wrote this down some years ago to become an author. And through this journey, I really, really, really want to share it. And I want to publish a book and really tell my story, but understand that I still have so much healing to do even after that, and in these last 21 days, I have really shown myself, how to heal through mind, body, and spirit. And so I do plan to write a book. So you have just given me confirmation that I am on the right path.
Oh, yeah. I think I would 100% read your story, but I think that you provide so much inspiration to these people who maybe have a bad conduct discharge. I actually had an episode really early on in my podcast with the lady who works with veterans. She's an attorney, and she works with veterans who specifically have bad conduct discharges for mental health. Yes. There's a lot of people, especially when we're looking at the older military, that got kicked out for something like you, where maybe they were just going through it. Definitely. We talked about these major life changes that happen and how people cope. And if we aren't giving service members the tools to cope, you can't always blame them. Yeah, we all know not to do drugs in the military, not to drink and drive, whatever people get discharged for. Right. There's a number of things, but we should always be questioning, why are people doing this? There's always signs before it happens. Not everyone's just a bad person doing a bad thing. So I'm so grateful that you shared your story. I want to close off.
I'm so thankful that you had me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I would love if you would just share with everyone where they can find you if they want to come see you or want to support what you're doing.
Awesome. Yeah. So you guys can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Squad Beauty Professionals. You can also add me on a personal Facebook page. My name's Stephanie Gunner on there, Gunner. If you ever want any information, you can go to our website, www.squadbeautyprofessionals.com. I actually have a beauty biz boot camp that is going to be released at the end of this year. And I would love to help even, people who are leaving the military to transition into a beauty business. Okay. Like I have learned so much through that transition. And a lot of the times transition is just hard, period. Going from that military lifestyle into, something completely different. We need to have support. There's so many things that I didn't know about that I learned about later. And there's so many resources out there for us. We just don't know about them. And so I would love to chat with anybody who is leaving the military and wanting to become a beauty professional. I am the person to talk to. Okay. But yeah, go to our website, squadbeautyprofessionals.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram, Squad Beauty Professionals, or you can send me an email at info@squadbeautyprofessionals.com.
Well, I look forward to seeing everything that you have going on. I'm so excited to continue to support you and watch you support other women, people transitioning out of the military. And thank you again for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.